Hi, I'm Yulia, and this is Red Lines, a show where we dive into some daring subjects and cross red lines of political speak. Today, with me, I have Rick the Ukrainian from the eponymous YouTube channel, and we're going to be discussing, well, North Korean troops in Ukraine, also the election in Moldova, and the election in Georgia. To sum it up, we're going to be discussing how Russia is buying votes in Europe and buying soldiers in North Korea. Well, today is a lovely day for both of us. We're both so alive and so happy to be talking a lot.
Oh yeah.
You look especially
Hi,
very
Yulia.
alive. Hi, Rick.
Oh yeah.
Always good to
Oh,
see you.
good to see you too.
Well, at least we are doing alive. So
Mm.
today, I suppose we're going to be talking about the issue with North Korea, but I would also add in the issue of Russia generally
Yeah.
procuring citizens of different countries in order to do its bidding in those countries. Like, I would start with the fact that maybe not a lot of people know Maya Sandu, who is the Democratic leader of Moldova, did end up winning the election in Moldova, despite Russia being accused of meddling
Just
with the election.
we need to applaud right now because that was a tough task. Moldova is not a big country, and it was really not easy to withstand the attack of Russians.
It's also a tough task because there are a lot of pro-Russian politicians that Russia has inserted in
Yes.
Moldova, and Russia really did put like funnel so much money in
Yeah.
her losing. For
Yeah.
instance, there is a video that's been flying around online, and Moldova has, on an official level, accused Russia of meddling in its election of literally Russian planes loaded with Russian citizens who also have a Moldovan citizenship being
Yep.
transported from Russia to Moldova to vote for the pro-Russian parties. And the
Yep.
fact that she managed to win that is incredible. But I was saying, I don't know if people might remember, but I think a couple of episodes ago, I talked about this, where I was saying that, usually people think that Moldova is like a very, Moldova has always been like sort of, this type of country where they don't necessarily care too much, and they don't necessarily like
Hmm.
involve themselves in politics too much, and they've never really talked a lot about like hating to live near Russia. But there have been videos surfacing online a lot recently of like Moldovan citizens, like flipping off Russian guards at checkpoints, I mean armed guards, and just generally having a lot of like anti-Russian sentiments, which is amazing.
Yeah.
So it did seem like they're kind of tired of all of this as well, and very, very vocally. So that was a
Yeah.
very heartwarming
Yeah.
predictor for me.
Yeah. For me too. But to just see that basically Russia, as you said, put huge amount of resources to make this election.
Huge.
They literally bought the votes, and there were videos where people on the street were trying to get money for their vote, and basically, yeah, it was pretty open. They Russians are always acting very. Brazen, they are ready. They don't care if anyone sees that they are staging the election, especially these days when they see
Mhm.
that they can get away with anything. They can invade other countries, they can partner with North Korea, and the world will not react properly. The world will just, uh, I won't swear here, okay? So, yeah, the world will just let them
Bat
get
their
away with
eyelashes.
it. Bat their eyelashes.
Yeah, like,
Oh, yeah,
bat their
nice.
eyelashes.
So learning something new in English, that's what I like to do, and so I'm really happy. And to me, I think that's an indicator. It's not Maya Sandu's victory, it's the victory of people of Moldova.
Yeah, it is.
Because considering the amount of resources that Russia put into basically
Mhm,
making this election a fraud, and letting their goons win,
mhm.
it is just it indicates, it shows that people of Moldova are sick of the Russian shit, and they need to move to Europe because they see what's going to happen to them. Belarus is going to happen to them if pro-Russian government will come to
Mhm.
them. Georgia will happen to them. We also got to talk about Georgia, Yulia, and What about the opposition? But let's finish with Moldova. I'm really happy for Moldovan people. I am congratulating them also with the successful referendum to for them to really move to European Union
Yeah,
constitutionally. So now they have this in their constitution, and that's just fantastic. So I'm so happy for our neighbors, and yeah, it is heartwarming indeed to see at least one victory over Russia in these 2.5 years.
for sure. It's always really good to see a victory over Russia in 2.5 years. I mean, Georgia, however, is a very similar situation to Moldova and doesn't look nearly as good. Though I think Russia sort of like I think the reason also why Moldova was able to do what Moldova did is because Russians funneled money into Moldova way too late. As in
Hmm.
like the occupation of Transnistria has been going on for 30 years, and they thought
Yeah.
that they have a grip, so they weren't overly investing into like the new population, and they
Mhm.
weren't overly investing into meddling with their politics because they thought they had it. Similarly to how they thought they had Ukraine, and they thought that we're gonna all like greet the Russian
Bow
soldiers
down.
arms and
Yeah.
bow down to them. I think a similar situation happened in Moldova where they thought that since Moldova, hasn't really been like Maya Sandu has been expressing a lot of anti-Russian sentiments, which is
Hmm.
why they don't want her. But Moldovan population hasn't been like as vocally against Russia, right, on the in the
Hmm.
media and everything as like for instance Georgia was. But they just
Yeah.
quietly did their job and they separated themselves as heavily as they could, which is nice. Georgia is a different story because Georgia, well, first of all, the occupation of Georgia happened way later than Moldova. I think a lot of people don't realize that Transnistria has been occupied since like 1993 or something.
One.
One, yeah.
Yeah, even one. It was going for 2 years, the war there. Russians occupied
Mhm.
part of the territory and then just frozen the conflict, just like they did in Georgia and Ukraine. Classics.
They do all the time, yeah.
Yeah.
And Transnistria has been occupied for like 30 years, but Georgia, that started happening. That happened in 2008, and it's also way closer. It hits way closer.
Wait,
Mhm.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but isn't the first part of Georgia was occupied in
90s.
90s?
Yeah.
Yes. It was 1998 or 99?
Well, the first war was in the 90s, and then like it's similar to Chechnya, where there was like an agreement after that,
Hmm.
and then in 2008 is where they actually took over.
But
And
wait, there are two different territories. There's Yuzhna Ossetia and Abkhazia.
Abkhazia and
And
South Ossetia, yeah.
I thought that it was happening in different periods of time. First Yuzhna Ossetia and then Abkhazia.
So Abkhazia actually, I think, happened before South Ossetia. Let's
Hmm.
fact check ourselves,
Yeah,
or let's fact
that's
check.
gonna be good. Let's do it. Yeah, Abkhazia was first, you're right. It was 1992, 1993. So,
The reason
hmm,
I know Abkhazia was first is actually because, maybe this is a good time to tell this story, provided that we're already talking about it.
hmm.
When I first moved to New York City, my parents came to drop me off. It was my mom, my grandma, and my dad. My dad really loves like exploring every city he goes to. He makes connections. He might not even speak your language, but he's gonna make friends with you. So he met this woman who at that point I think worked at like Roberto Cavalli, like one of the brand name, like one of the expensive brand stores. And he made friends with her. I'm not gonna name her name, but her dad was a very high postulated Georgian official in Abkhazia. And I mean not Abkhaz Georgian official in Abkhazia.
Uh-huh.
And she had to flee because her entire family was killed in front of her while she was hiding, like let's say in a closet in her like
Hmm.
mansion or wherever it is that they lived. So in the 90s she was able to escape Abkhazia, and she moved to the United States at some point and she started like living here. She really doesn't like talking about it. I actually asked her if I could interview her, when when the full scale invasion of Ukraine broke out, and she responded and said that she doesn't like talking about it because it's, what's in the past is in the past, and she really sympathizes
Mhm.
with Ukraine and hopes that like what happened to her is not going to happen to us. But yeah, so I know this because I remember her story, and I remember um, her talking about how Russians were murdering, specifically because there was like the whole thing about well, so the whole thing was that Abkhazians are a separate nation, and they're trying to separate themselves from Georgia, and Russians obviously came to help them, and to and to
Classics.
yeah. And so everyone who wasn't from Abkhazia but was from Georgia was considered an enemy, and her parents were from Georgia, and so they were murdered. And she has some family. I think she has a younger brother, and maybe like some cousins or something. But yeah, her immediate family doesn't exist. So that's how I remember that Abkhazia was first.
Hmm. It's a pity. I mean, she was a child back then, right?
No, she's in her. I mean, she's in her like I want to say late 40s now.
So back then she was no, still she was a child,
In
like
the
10
90s?
years old
Yeah, probably
in
like 12.
1991.
Yeah, probably like 12 or something. I mean, she no, well, she has to be like 10 years younger than my parents, right? So my mom was born in 68. So let's say she was born in 78 or 80. Yeah, she would be like 13.
Yeah, and the problem with this is it would be amazing if she shared her story to let the world know
Yeah.
what the Russian world is, because basically that was also a part of the Russian world doing
Yeah.
that war. And but the problem is, I think she probably has a huge trauma after witnessing her whole family being killed in front of her.
I mean, she
So,
probably has a huge trauma. I also think she changed her name. I think that she was from a very, very like not simple family in that
mhm,
region. And I don't think that she's like, I think that for a while there they thought that she died with along with like the rest of her family. So I think her situation is more like she's just scared. She doesn't want like Russia to be anywhere after her. She has a family, like like
mhm,
her husband is not Georgian. She like lives a very a very distant from Georgia, let's put it that way, life in New York, and just tries to sort of like live her existence very far away from all of this, because it's kind of understandable in this case. Some people become bigger advocates, and some people just want to forget that ever happened. And you can't really blame them
yeah,
because you never
yeah, that's
experienced what
understandable.
they did.
Totally. Um, Coming back, getting back to Georgia and what happened there
Yeah.
lately, the election, how we saw a lot of videos where ballots were thrown into the boxes,
Mhm.
and people were being bitten next to the election. How do you call them? Offices? No,
Polls,
polls.
polling
Yeah,
stations.
next
Yeah.
polling stations. Yeah. So it's all obvious Russians are not actually hiding in this case too. I mean,
Mhm.
more like probably pro-Russians in this case, because in there they were not probably sending Russian citizens, they're Russian Georgian citizens. Maybe they were also doing that, but they didn't even need to do it because they already have a regime there, and
Yeah.
we've seen that regime being beating the protesters and being shutting them up in what 2023 it was,
Hmm.
when someone painted "fuck Russia" on the bus stop. Remember, with
Hmm.
the red
Yeah.
paint, looked like blood. And that was actually, in my opinion, the breaking point for them, the point of no return. If they were pushing harder back then and they were able to do what Ukrainians were able to do in
Hmm.
2014, and then we could have seen different outcome this year. But unfortunately they did not go through, and did not push hard enough, and did not fought their freedom. Like,
Yeah.
so that's a pity. That's another enslaved nation, enslaved by Russians, and I don't think. I mean, they showed it after this election. That was not really fair. It was not fair at all. They did what? Protested for 2 hours,
Yeah.
and then
And that
their
didn't do anything.
opposition with their opposition did the opposite thing. They actually they what has given up their mandate.
Mm-hmm.
What? Come on, is it? It is the Russian fucking way to fight their struggle.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember our
Yeah.
struggle to hit the pans with the spoon and to just put some hashtags somewhere? So
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, Georgian people seems to be enslaved already in their own country, and that's fucking terrifying.
Yeah, it is.
Considering,
I mean, I had a lot of hope for them because again they protested, but then I don't think anyone is really ready to do what we did with Maidan, which is why no one's really going to be able to kind of like to escape this Russian occupation because the only way to do it is through surviving Maidan, or surviving a
hmm,
revolution like Maidan because unfortunately without violence you're not going to be able to free yourself, and that's really really crappy and really upsetting, but it is what it is, and it's
yeah,
just something that happens. Speaking of
I
like,
wonder.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I wonder how we did that. Like, what you say? No one is ready for that. Is it like the time changed? Were they? You think they
No,
would be
I
able
don't
to do it in 2014?
I don't think it's about time. I think it's about the fact that you have to be willing to get hurt. You have to be willing to get hurt, and you have to be willing to get hurt profusely, right? Like the difference between the Ukrainian revolution and most revolutions is that like the more police comes out to hurt you and the more police comes out with like weapons and the more intricate sort of anti-protest gear they're using, the less people are staying because people don't want to get hurt.
Yeah.
In Ukraine it was the opposite. The
How?
more
Why? Like, I am just curious. What do you think about
I
this?
think we're so fucking tired. I, I think that because our entire history is just us fighting against Russia, I think that people literally had nothing to lose. You know what I'm saying? It's sort of like
Yeah.
a lot of people came to terms with the Russian occupation of their government and the Russian occupation of like some processes in their country, and I think Ukrainians never did. And the
Yeah.
only reason that we let it happen for a while is because we kind of didn't notice. And then once the people woke up and were like, wait a freaking second, that's what's happening, people were not going to have it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, you're right. We got enough, and it's like never again for us. The slogan of the end of the World War II.
Hmm.
It is actually our story with Russians. Never again. We
Yeah.
won't let it happen again. I think I think Russians, even right now, in my opinion, we Ukrainians are losing this
Hmm.
war. They still won't be able to ever capture all Ukraine.
Hmm.
Like, because for that they will have to eliminate every single Ukrainian. That
Hmm.
might happen
Hmm.
someday, because not only them are engaged in this war right now. North Koreans, just believe me, in my
Hmm.
opinion, 12,000 North Koreans is just the beginning. It's just like a monthly supply. It's what Russia is lacking right now. To I
Hmm.
think since I heard that they are mobilizing 30,000 men each month
Yeah.
in Russia, and it's enough to occupy our territories slowly.
Yeah.
But the extra 12,000 troops, cannon fodder, will let them speed up the process. So I think that's actually the plan, to provide 12,000 men each month
Hmm.
and speed up the occupation to conquer all Ukraine faster. Hmm. That's yeah. I,
Well,
I came up with this just now.
Well, I don't know if it's that. I think it's mostly, well, they are lacking soldiers, which that's a good indicator, right? Because we always think like, oh, Russia has numbers and Ukraine doesn't. But the thing is, clearly, Russia doesn't have numbers because they're like asking North Korea. But here is an interesting thing that actually I just read, which is South Korean intelligence reports that a secretive agreement between North Korea and Russia includes a series of significant provisions highlighting a deepening alliance between the two countries. The terms reportedly cover the supply of 600 to 700,000 tons of rice to North Korea
Yeah.
annually, aimed at alleviating food shortages. Additionally, the agreement includes a monthly salary of $2,000 for North Korean troops deployed to assist Russia's military operations against Ukraine, which to an average person sounds like nothing. No one's willing to die on the front lines of Ukraine for $2,000, but North Korea, I don't think
Do
these
they even have money in North
that's the thing.
Korea?
Like, I think they have the equivalent of what we used to have in the Soviet Union, which is like tickets, right?
Coupons? Yeah.
Yeah, tickets and coupons. So I don't know if like they're getting the money or Kim Jong Un is getting the money. I feel like Kim
Yeah.
Jong Un is getting $2,000 for each soldier
For
that he
each
deploys to
soldier.
Ukraine, and they get rice, which
Yeah, because
yeah,
basically each North Korean citizen lives for their Sonsesaine. How do you say that in English? The sunshine great god of
also
Kim
so
Jong Un. Yeah.
we talked about 10,000 soldiers being like North Korea sending 10,000 soldiers to Ukraine, right? So how much did Kim Jong Un make? He made well, my phone is not willing to show me this number. Give me 1 second. I'm just like curious as to how much money he made. Okay, $20 million.
$20 million, pretty cool. He can buy himself
He
some
made 20
good
million
luxury cars. You know
dollars.
that he likes movies. I watched a documentary about
Yeah,
their
he
family.
likes Western movies, which is like a guilty
Yes,
pleasure of his because you're not
yes.
supposed to, because everything Western is really bad. But he went to school in the Western world. So,
Yeah, and you see, he has Mercedes there in North Korea. He can smuggle anything there. So I think a few Ferraris for $20 million, maybe some yachts. So yeah, he
I
will
mean,
get
the
some.
thing is, interestingly, he has a lot of money. North Korea doesn't have a lot of money. So, I mean, hey, he's getting $20
Who
million
cares?
and his people are getting fed rice and he doesn't have to spend
Yeah,
money on rice. I also like, I think that
win-win.
clearly. So that helps the food shortage. North Koreans are going to fatten up a little bit and maybe not look like they're 13 on the front lines. Because I don't know if you've seen these reports, but people have been saying that North Korean soldiers that have been sent to Ukraine, they look like they're teenagers. So in reality, they're all 20 and up. It's just they're so malnourished that they look like they're teenagers, and which
Hmm.
is why like people were have been laughing at this and like, oh my god, like, they're sending all of these like all of this cannon
Uh-huh.
fodder. But the thing is, like, I've said this before, right? And I love how I was right, and that Russia is going to make a deal with North Korea to give them food so that the next batches of soldiers that they're sending are not like that, right?
To
Yeah.
fed them up.
Yeah.
Nice.
And I'm like, I bet you that it's not even North Korea, like regular North Koreans that are going to be getting these meals and like food substitutions and like whatever and
Hmm.
rice. It's probably going to be the people that are of the age to serve and maybe their
Yeah,
families. So
yeah,
there's
you're
like an
right.
incentive for men to join the army.
Yeah, that's really good idea, and it makes sense. Yeah, just feed your army, feed them up. I
Mhm.
think. How long do you think? How much time it will take to feed them up? Half a month? Sorry,
Well,
half a
no.
year.
I mean, like, look, for an average person, probably if you eat a lot of rice, you can gain quite a bit of weight in like maybe 2, 3 months. But the thing is, like, if you're that malnourished, I think that yeah, like your body is probably going to be rejecting large amounts of food. So yeah, maybe six
Mhm.
months. I think in 6 months you
Yeah,
can make them look at least their age,
yeah, you're
which
right.
is
You're right.
like reasonable.
Hmm. Well, this kind of propaganda of ours or not, I'm not sure. That people start saying, they will be given into captivity just because they are, they want to escape North Korea all the time. But I think only like. Um, small percentage, like very small, like some thousand piece of percent wants to escape North Korea because propaganda is strong there. They're being
Yeah,
brainwashed
they don't know that
from the
anything is
birth.
there. And the reason why they're like in Kursk and the reason why they're like at the front where everything is destroyed, so they don't necessarily see the world and they don't necessarily see how things are different. So they like, here's the thing. The reality of the matter is that these soldiers are not getting the money. Okay. And they're not
Yeah,
getting
yeah,
anything because they're not supposed to come back. Kim Jong
yeah,
Un can't send 7,000 troops to Ukraine or to Russia to go on a train, see how the world looks, discover that people have electronics and free internet
yeah,
and like, whatever the heck it is, because they're going to come back and they're going to start talking to their families. That's a problem because that's how you get to a revolt. The reason why it's a
yep,
closed society is so that no one can get out and no one can tell that they're living in cave ages, right? So they just like it's all they know. So even if these people go to like Ukraine, right, and they get to these destroyed houses and they find like headphones and TVs and all of this stuff, and they see that Ukrainian people have all of this in exuberance, right? Like as in like we have normal houses with with normal tech and with like clothes and with whatever, literally. It is
hmm,
shocking for a North Korean soldier. And that's
mm,
reason for him to come back. Also, they're gonna to come back and talk. And they're likely going to do the same thing as Russians do, which is like smuggle stuff.
yeah,
And while that might not be a problem for Putin, that is a problem for Kim Jong Un because now suddenly families have like, I don't know, headphones and phones and all of this stuff, things that they're not supposed to have, right?
yeah,
So these guys that are deployed to Ukraine, they're not supposed to come back. It's a one-way ticket. They're absolutely not supposed to come back. Like
yeah,
their family is going to get a bag of rice for their death. So maybe I don't know. Maybe my prediction actually of like fattening them up might not even be real because maybe they're going to be fattening up like the rest of the population, not the soldiers, because the soldiers are supposed to be cannon fodder. What I found,
yeah.
I don't know if you read this, but what I found very interesting was that was that the initial assessment of the North Korean soldiers was that they have a really hard time adjusting to Russian high tech, and by high tech I mean like Soviet weapons. they, for North Koreans, they were like too advanced, and I thought it was like so charming.
Well, we can laugh at them how much we
Yeah,
want, but the problem is cannon fodder is cannon fodder.
of
It
course,
doesn't matter. Russian tactics unfortunately works. They just
of course.
outnumber. They don't care about their personnel. That personnel is just being traded by
Hmm.
for our soldiers, for the lives of our soldiers,
Of course.
and that's enough. What they need to do is send more and more, and at some point our defense will crumble. And
Hmm.
unfortunately, it is happening at some points of the front line. We can see it, especially the situation after they captured Vuhledar, those three villages and the
Hmm.
territory, like 17 kilometers deep, was captured in 5 days, and they keep marching forward. And yeah, we have right now some problems that probably is another topic of discussion.
Well, so here is something from Hur. In the last week of
Hmm.
October 2024, Russia reportedly transferred over 7,000 North Korean soldiers from Primorsky Krai to areas near Ukraine, according to Ukrainian intelligence (HUR). The deployment was facilitated by at least 28 Russian military transport planes. These troops were armed with various infantry-style equipment, including 60 mm mortars, AK-12 assault rifles, RPK PKM machine guns, SVD SVCH sniper rifles, Phoenix anti tank guided missiles, and RPG 7 rocket launchers. Additionally, they received night vision devices, thermal imagers, collimator sights, and binoculars to enhance their combat capabilities. The HUR noted that within the Russian occupation forces, these North Korean soldiers are referred to as special buryats.
Yeah,
This
I actually have read that report myself too. Yeah.
Well, so just in order to clarify the racism behind this, for our foreign viewers, Buryat or Buryats are a nation within Russia that's been obviously colonized a very long time ago, and they have Asian features. And they're not the only nation with Asian features in Russia, but because there were a lot of Buryats being deployed to the front in the beginning of the war because they were considered disposable. Um, Now, because North Koreans are also display Asian features because they're Asian, they are
Hmm.
referring to North Koreans as special Buryats. It's
Oh,
kind of like,
racism is part of Russian culture.
yeah,
Come
it's
on.
sort of like as if we referred to the Japanese and the Koreans and the Taiwanese and the Vietnamese as the special Chinese.
Yeah, yeah,
It's about
special.
the same type of deal here.
It's disgusting even to
It
say
is.
this phrase. So I said special, and then I did not finish
Yeah.
it. So you see, I forgot also to add so-called Russian culture, because I want to remind you guys that all that bullshit that Soviet Union was spreading around the world and calling it a Russian
Mhm.
culture, and before that the Russian Empire, and after that the current Russian Empire, Russian so-called Federation, they are just mm, they're just cultivating
Mhm.
violence, racism, chauvinism. What else? Cult of death. That's also how I see Russian culture. They glorify death. They actually make it romantic, you know. And speaking of that, they had a memorial being placed last week somewhere in Russia. I don't care where exactly. Monument to a suicide soldier who is sitting behind, not behind, he's leaning on the wall that is partially destroyed somewhere in
Mhm.
Ukraine, and he is sitting on the ground on his body armor, and he is holding a grenade. And they usually put that grenade under their
Mhm.
body armor to make their insides explode. And Russians are being, they are constantly being reminded that
Mhm.
they need not to give up to Ukrainian captivity. They need to blow themselves up, shoot themselves, and that's some, you know, some of them who don't do that. They discover then that it was all the lie. But the problem is, even after realizing that, they still believe in Russian propaganda. Most of them. That's what I see in the interviews that Ukrainian journalists Zolkin and Karpenko are doing with Russian prisoners of war. It's crazy. Like seeing everything, not everything, some of it with their own eyes. It's not enough to understand that all that they were told is just lies, for most of them. So propaganda is a tool, is a thing that you cannot really wash out of the brains of the person. Um, Yulia, have you ever thought about that phenomenon of how strong, not only Russian, any propaganda is, and how much it gets into the brain of the person? So basically, it will not go away until the end of their life for most of people.
Yeah, I mean it is very strong. Like I think I've told this story to quite a few of my viewers a while ago, but I'll refresh your memory. So my grandfather works at a military university in Ukraine. He works with a lot of different types of troops. He's rewritten the program of physical prep for the Ukrainian military, specifically for pichota. I keep forgetting it. I always forget
Infantry,
infantry.
right?
Yeah, 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 exactly. Physical. It's like basically how they prepare for combat, not combat tactics, but physical like prep for combat. So he works with the military every day. And when the invasion first began, my grandpa is originally Russian speaking. He watches a lot of Russian soap operas while he works. They're just kind of like buzzing in the background. So obviously, all of those soap operas turned into Russian propaganda TV. And
Mhm.
he came to my aunt and said, Nastya, I mean, screw Russia, but like Azov, they're Nazis. I've seen videos on TV of them with their tattoos, and they're all like swastikas and stuff. And it's just like it's awful. Like I don't understand how I've never noticed this. This is just really bad. And my aunt was like, okay, it's her dad, right? She's like, listen, I'm a motion picture animator, right? Like I do special effects for TV, and I can film you and have you have swastikas as tattoos all over you. It doesn't it's not real. And we then collectively decided that we were going to turn off cable for our grandparents and for my grandparents, her parents, and say that these channels have been just like blocked in Ukraine, which they ended up being blocked a couple of weeks later. And suddenly, 2 weeks post not watching any of this, he's come back to reality and understands that Azov are not Nazis and that Russia is really bad and that Russia is faking all of this information.
But he is a Ukrainian. It doesn't work like that with Russians. For some
Yeah.
reason, it's so deep in their brain. I mean, it's like what I see statistically. I don't say that every Russian will just believe in propaganda until the end of their days, but it was the same with Germans after World War II. They kept believing that they were right.
Well,
Have you heard those stories?
yeah, but it's also sort of like one of those things where it's not just so a Ukrainian starts watching alternate news sources, right? As in like we have not even that we have access, they have access too, but we have a lot we have a lot of options to choose from, and we want to choose from different options. What happens with Russians is even if they leave Russia, they continuously watch Russian TV. If they don't watch like
Yeah.
Putin's TV, they watch TV Rain and Russian opposition TV and whatever the heck it is that is also like not opposition. So it just basically ends up being the same thing, just in a different font, which is why they never get debrainwashed.
Mhm. You're right. But unfortunately, it happens not only to Russians. Some Ukrainians who are being brainwashed by Russian propaganda, we also have those. Unfortunately, when they live abroad, they keep watching Russian TV. Russian TV is guys, it's the most evil thing that was ever invented, and it's everywhere. And I wonder if the world will ever realize that they need to get rid of it and to block it everywhere and not permit that. But we have the freedom of speech. It's not free speech, it's propaganda. It's just you need to realize that there's a difference between propaganda and freedom of speech. And that freedom of speech is being abused by Russia. And that's what actually lets them win in many countries.
Well, I mean, yeah, propaganda and freedom of speech are different. Russian TV is very evil. It's not only evil because the news do this, but like I think me and Starsky talked about it quite extensively. That they embed these kind of like Russian propaganda points and these notions
Mhm.
into movies and into TV shows and into books. They just kind of insert it everywhere in your daily life, and you don't
Mhm.
even notice it, especially
Yeah.
if you like read things in Russian. Like I just the other day on Instagram, I had this thing come up, and it was basically how Russian dubbing changes the parts of movies. And this bit was basically about how anytime something negative is being said about Russia or Putin in a Hollywood movie, they
Mhm.
mistranslate it on purpose so that it doesn't say something negative about Russia or Putin. And one of the examples was like it was like an action movie, and the girl, the main character, said, "Well, first we shoot them, and then we ask questions, like Putin would do." And in the Russian translation, it says, "Well, first we shoot them, and then we ask questions, like we always do." so, so Putin is not mentioned, by any means, or
Yeah.
anytime like someone says something like, "Oh, we're just gonna kill them and not ask questions," Russian style, it's literally gonna be like, "Oh, we're just gonna kill them and not ask any questions, like as per usual."
Mm-hmm.
They
Yeah.
mistranslate things specifically in order for Russians to not see how the world views them.
Yeah. Exactly. And when you were telling that story about the dubbing, I also remembered that in Russian language itself, there are
Mhm.
a few things that are basically propaganda, because you see, they are never saying в Украине. They say на Украине. It's like
Not yeah,
na,
like in the
it's
Ukraine,
in the Ukraine, but like I
on
would
Ukraine.
also on Ukraine, yeah. So basically, in Ukraine, instead of saying in Ukraine, they always say on Ukraine. So they are even in their language, and
Because
it's
like you
also
would
about
say on an island, like it's a small
yes.
thing, right? Or like on the territory of something. So that's the
Hmm.
reason why they say on, not in. You know what I was trying to look up right now? I was wondering, speaking of like propaganda and mistranslation, I was wondering what Russian propaganda looks like in North Korea.
Hmm.
Because there has to be propaganda for these people to like come and join Russia in their fight, right? Or like for more soldiers to come and join the military. So I was
Hmm.
so curious as to how Russian propaganda is portrayed in North Korea, and I can't find anything.
Well, do you like? Are you able to find anything at all about the
Mm,
insides of
no.
North Korea?
Mm-mm.
That's because they have the Iron Curtain.
Well, yeah, but so does so did Russia for a little bit, but not the same, obviously. But I am just okay. Propaganda in North Korea, narratives and distribution channels, Center for Countering Disinformation. Propaganda in the DPRK is spread exclusively through state resources, state funded media, and government and party organizations that were created to work with information policy. Through a centralized system of information control, Pyongyang actively promotes narratives that correspond to three main propaganda lines: justification of Russia's aggression against Ukraine and support for Russia's actions in general, harsh anti Western rhetoric, emphasizing its independence and power. The main actors in North Korea's propaganda are TV hosts, politicians, and party officials. Kim Jong, the younger sister of North Korean dictator Kim Jong Un, plays an important role in shaping the DPRK's information policy. North Korea's propaganda about the war in Ukraine is a key element of its foreign policy and serves as a tool to strengthen its authoritarian regime. That's so interesting because I want to see like specific examples of like there have to be posters, like because we've seen all of these like the proletary of the world unite type of things like we've seen in the communist Russia, right? So we've seen that North Korea has still uses these tactics. So I'm so curious to see these like Russians and North Koreans are one type of posters because that's definitely something that they're doing, right?
Yeah, yeah, it should be there, I guess. So, Yulia, what do you think?
What do I think?
Do we have more topics?
I don't think we do, but now I'm going to leave this conversation desperately searching for what Russian propaganda in North Korea looks like. I want to find one poster, and if anyone is better at locating these things than I am, please email them to me. Or, like, I don't know, comment that you have it, and I'll reach out to you because I'm so curious. Well,
Would be pretty cool. Show it to me when you find it, okay?
of course. Maybe we'll print
Thank
them
you.
out and, like, have them on our wall and stare at it every morning. I'm kidding. But thank you, Rick, for talking to me for this entire time and for, trying to focus on something that is not the American election, which I feel like the entirety of the world is going to be focusing on today.
Yeah. Thank you, Yulia, for inviting me. I'm not super energetic today. Didn't have enough sleep. So it could be a better conversation, but I think we still
I
had
think we still did a good job.
a good one. So thank you.
Well, hopefully, this conversation ticked some boxes and turned some gears. If you enjoy conversations like this and want to see more of them, please don't forget to follow this channel, give this video a like, and send it to a friend because you never know who might be interested. Of course, also do comment your questions, suggestions, and constructive criticism because I read all of it and I really enjoy hearing from you. Till next time.